Angry people. How do you feel about angry people? I was having a discussion with somebody recently about anger and expressing anger and people who are angry and how we feel about them. And I realized that maybe the way that I feel about anger and the way that I think about angry people is different from others. So what do you think? Start thinking right now as we're talking. How do you feel about angry people? I think that I used to, like way back when I was a child, teenager, I used to always be afraid of angry people. And I actually think that makes complete and total sense because one of the things that animals in general are afraid of, but it's also coded into our bodies, is loud noises. And what do angry people tend to do? They tend to get loud. So that makes sense to me. It makes sense to me that when somebody's loud, we get a little bit afraid because loud noise is just something that scares us naturally. And when we're talking about anger, anger is like a real system in our body. We have a rage system that is built in for different purposes. One of those purposes being for trying to conquer something, like when we're working on a project or when we're physically fighting somebody and defending ourselves, we get angry when we feel like we're not accomplishing the goal. And anger is a way of motivating us to continue. And in that way, anger is actually a good thing, even though a lot of us think of it as a bad thing. But we've all also seen many instances where anger becomes violent, where rage becomes destructive. And in the aftermath of rage or a total freak out, things can get really bad. People can get hurt. Things can be broken. It's not good. Take a moment and reflect on some ways that you have seen anger expressed, whether you expressed it yourself or somebody else. All of us have had different experiences with anger. Maybe you've had a parent who was an angry parent, or maybe you had a child who was an angry child. And maybe those situations color how you see angry people. Maybe you witnessed an incident in public and it was really scary, or maybe it was embarrassing. Maybe it was something that you did and you didn't expect that to ever come out of you. I'm betting that some of you have some really interesting stories about a time that you witnessed anger, and I'd love to hear them, so leave them down below in the comments. So each of these memories that you've experienced are going to shape the way that you relate to angry people, including if that angry person is yourself. You may have certain feelings about what anger means and what happens when somebody is angry. It's important to think about these things because, like I said, discussing this with my friend, I realized maybe I'm a little bit different than the way that she thinks about things, and maybe I'm different from the way a lot of people think about anger. So part of this video is me trying to figure that out with you, but it's also just opening up the discussion. So if you are somebody who is uncomfortable with angry people, I want to discuss that a little bit. I especially want to discuss it because I'm somebody who is comfortable expressing anger. I think expressing anger is great, actually, and I do it regularly. And since I am somebody who is comfortable with anger, I thought maybe sharing my side of things might help you see things a different way. I don't know. Let's talk about it. The first thing that I definitely want to say is rage is a little bit scary. Rage is an emotion that does motivate people, and it does motivate people in ways that sometimes are destructive, as I mentioned, and that's not good. If you're somebody who gets angry yourself and you find that you do things like lash out and hurt people, destroy things, I don't think that's a good expression of anger. I don't think we should encourage that kind of expression of anger. And if you come across somebody who's behaving this way, I think it's going to depend for each person what you want to do. Sometimes it's okay to point out that somebody is angry and let them know, I see that you're angry. But some people, when you do that, they're just going to get more angry. And I think when you notice that saying things that are fairly neutral to somebody who's angry, or when you try to empathize with somebody who's angry and they just kind of get more and more angry, it's probably best to just leave that situation. Let them be angry, let them express themselves, but just don't be a part of that so that you are protecting yourself. It's totally okay to defend yourself from somebody who's being angry. If you feel up for it, you can ask questions to find out why what you said is making that person more angry. But that's not a requirement. Nobody is required to have empathy for somebody who appears dangerous. However, on the other side of this is someone like me, somebody who, when I express anger, I'm not trying to hurt anybody. I'm most likely not going to destroy anything or break anything. I used to be that person, so I get what happens and I get how that's a scary thing for other people. But I've grown and I don't do that kind of thing anymore. But I do still express my anger because I think it's important to express my anger. So if you see somebody like me, maybe getting a little bit louder, maybe showing frustration on my face, maybe making gestures that I'm angry, maybe making myself look bigger or something, because these are the kind of things that we do when we get angry. I wouldn't just assume right away that you're in danger. I know that some people are going to have this feeling and this internal experience of being in danger right away, and that's going to be informed by your previous experiences with people who've been angry. As I said, if you've been around people, maybe that's your only experience of people who are angry, is people who hurt other people when they're angry, then it makes sense that your body's going to react in a way of, oh no, anger in general is scary and anger in general is something we need to stop or we need to get away from. But I find personally expressing anger is really important. It helps get it out of my body where it's kind of like rattling around and causing a lot of stress for me. And it just takes the edge off when I express it. It makes it so that I can get to a place of peace, so that it's not something that's festering within me and really disrupting my life. And sometimes also, once that anger is expressed and somebody else has witnessed it, maybe validated it, it helps me to connect with other people, which I don't think we normally think of anger as being a connection kind of an emotion, but it can be. Have you ever felt connected to somebody else after you expressed anger with them? Think about it. I want to hear your experiences because I definitely have. So here's my personal thing with anger. I'm okay with other people expressing anger. Again, I express it, so I kind of have to be okay with other people expressing it. But when people get angry around me, typically my reaction is to just be okay with it. Maybe get curious about why they're angry or start thinking about, like, is this a dangerous situation or is it not? I don't just jump into that it's dangerous because, again, for me, expressing anger is just comfortable and normal and it's okay. Where I personally draw the line is when I feel that that anger starts becoming directed towards me. Because once it starts becoming directed towards me, whether that be through blame or whether that be including me in whatever the narrative that the person is saying, somehow making it my problem, like I need to solve something for them, that's when I just kind of zone out or I get away from that. Because once the anger is directed towards me, I feel like the other person can't hear me when I try to empathize with them or when I try to validate them or hear their anger. And it starts to feel like a dangerous situation once I feel like that person is trying to control me or get something out of me or harm me in some way. Now, for myself, when I see something like that going on, it's going to depend on the situation. Sometimes I'll just walk away. It's the best you can do. Other times, maybe I'll point it out to that person. I'll say, right now, you're getting louder and I don't like it. I don't want you to talk to me that way. Sometimes that's enough to kind of get people to realize what's going on, or maybe they can further clarify that they're not really angry at me or they're not trying to get me involved in some way. But what I think it's important to realize here is that anger is not like a permanent thing. And people who are chronically angry, who you see as always being rageful, that is definitely a serious problem. And it's not necessarily your problem to deal with. It's just not your problem to deal with. If it's a loved one or if it's somebody that you can't really get away from, you have to work with in some way, of course, you'll want to try to keep them as stress-free as possible, and you'll want to find a way to communicate with them that works for the two of you. But really, that chronic problem doesn't need to become your chronic problem, and I would get away from that as quickly as I could. Because really, although I'm comfortable with anger and I'm all for expressing anger, I'm not cool with people hurting other people, especially again and again and again as a repetitive behavior. And if you allow that to continue, then that person gets the message that it's okay to express their anger this way. And I am not okay with that. And I don't want to ever see people being okay with that. It's not okay. Sometimes when we're angry, when we're rageful, when that system is firing like full force, it is really hard to see from somebody else's perspective. And it's really hard while we're angry to have empathy for the person across from us who's listening or who's trying to listen, and we're just kind of like steamrolling over. So I think that's important to acknowledge and be aware of, especially if we're somebody who gets angry a lot. We should try to slow things down, slow down our minds if they're racing, slow down our breathing a little bit, and try to stay calm even though we're angry so that we don't get a little bit out of control and hurt other people. I really want to know what you think about this, because when I think of anger, I see like all kinds of discussions online that get really nasty really fast. You know, we have cyberbullying and we just have like political opinions and all kinds of craziness that happens online. And anger just seems to be like a regular part of the ecosystem. People write me angry comments here, which I don't approve because I'm not okay with them. But I want to know what you think, because anger is one of those things that I kind of have a suspicion that most people are not comfortable with the emotion of anger, and most people would rather not see anger expressed. And I'm somebody who believes it really should be expressed because it helps that person get past whatever it is that they're angry about, and it helps them relate to other people, where maybe part of the reason why they're angry in the first place is because they don't feel connected to other people. If you don't leave a comment, I'm going to be angry at you. Okay, everybody, thank you for listening and thinking this through with me. I would love to hear from you. Go ahead and subscribe if you want to learn more about mental health, and that's about it. So thank you.